Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a video centered around the love story of James and Diep. I invite you to stay with today's video to better understand the developments that are gradually becoming more tense in their relationship. The house is large and luxurious, filled with expensive furnishings arranged neatly, yet for some reason, it carries an oppressive sense of coldness. The atmosphere inside feels heavier than usual, and the empty spaces between the tall walls only make people feel smaller and more insignificant. James stands facing his father. Physically, they are not far apart, but between them lies an invisible distance that has stretched on for many years, impossible to close. The father's gaze slowly sweeps across the modest home where James is living with Diep. It is not a look of simple curiosity or observation, but one of careful scrutiny, mixed with disdain and disappointment. In his eyes, nothing here is worthy, neither the living space nor the woman his son has chosen. To him, this place is too simple, too different from the world he has always believed James should belong to. In the father's mind, Diep is a woman with an incomplete background. She has no parents by her side and was once a single mother. In his eyes, that past is not merely a flaw, but an insurmountable barrier. He believes that someone like Diep is unqualified to step into the family he has built with a lifetime of effort, a family where reputation, status, and appearances are always placed above all else. James's choice of Diep feels to him like a betrayal of the values he has held on to for so long. His voice echoes through the house, deep and heavy, each word pressing down on the already suffocating air. He brings up the more than 20 years he spent raising James, providing his education, sacrificing effort, money, and even his youth so that his son could have the life he has today. In his thinking, that act of raising a child is not only a father's responsibility, but also a form of authority, a justification that grants him the right to decide James's future. To him, James owes him, and because of that debt, James must obey his arrangements. James falls silent for a moment. His father's words leave him unable to immediately argue back, because deep down, he has never denied his family's sacrifices. His hands clench tightly, as if to keep himself from trembling under the crushing pressure. He understands the pain of being trapped between filial duty on one side and his own love and happiness on the other. When James finally speaks, his voice is not loud, but it is clear and resolute. He says that he is grateful to his parents for giving him life and raising him, but that gratitude cannot become the price he pays by giving up his entire future. James affirms that he is grown now, 28 years old, no longer a child who needs others to make decisions for him. He believes he is capable of taking responsibility for his own choices, for the path he has chosen, even if that path does not align with his family's expectations. James's words echo in the silence, opening a crack between two generations, between viewpoints that cannot easily be reconciled, and between a father accustomed to control and a son who is struggling to protect his own happiness. James breaks the silence for the first time after years of holding everything inside. The thoughts he once believed should remain unspoken, the emotions he suppressed out of fear of hurting others or causing conflict, now leave him with no choice but to speak. In that moment, James is no longer the obedient son who always bowed to arrangements made for him, but a man struggling to reclaim the right to live honestly with his own feelings. His voice begins restrained, but as he continues, layers of buried emotion slowly rise to the surface, making his words less calm than before. James admits that he has lived far too long under his father's control. From his education and career to the most important decisions of his life, everything seemed to have been predetermined, leaving him only to follow the path laid out for him. He grew accustomed to pleasing his father, to sacrificing his own desires in exchange for peace within the family. Yet that very familiarity has left him exhausted. James says he no longer wants to live this way, no longer wants his life to be nothing more than a shadow of expectations imposed on him, even if those expectations come from his own father. He speaks frankly, without avoiding the truth, saying that he cannot accept his love being treated as a disgrace, as something that brings shame upon the family. Every time he hears his father mention Diep with contempt in his eyes, it feels as though something inside him shatters. To James, Diep is not a mistake, nor is she something to be ashamed of. She is the woman he loves, the person who stood by him through his darkest moments. His father's rejection of Diep is, in his eyes, a rejection of who he truly is, of the choices he has carefully made and taken responsibility for. The house grows increasingly suffocating as James brings up the past. He looks directly at his father now, no longer avoiding his gaze. This time, James asks the question he has long buried deep inside. He asks whether, years ago, when his grandfather forced his father to live according to someone else's will, to choose a path he never wanted, his father truly accepted it without resistance. The question carries no accusation, yet it cuts deeply enough to touch a memory the father has always tried to forget. For James, it is his way of asking why the wounds of one generation must continue to be passed down to the next. From that moment on, the argument can no longer maintain any sense of restraint. The father's voice grows rigid, even harsh, each word fueled by pent-up anger and disappointment. He stops trying to persuade and begins to impose his will. A cold ultimatum is delivered, leaving no room for compromise. If James continues his relationship with Diep, then he should never set foot in this house again. The words fall sharply and decisively, like a blade cutting straight through a father-son bond already riddled with cracks. Faced with that choice, James does not step back. He straightens his posture and takes a deep breath, as if steadying himself from trembling. The look in his eyes is no longer fear or hesitation, but resolve. James states clearly that whether his decision is right or wrong, he is prepared to accept all the consequences. He does not seek to blame circumstances, nor does he ask for protection. To him, bearing responsibility for his own choices is far more valuable than continuing to live a life filled with regret. The confrontation reaches its peak when James mentions Diep once again. His voice lowers, no longer sharp, yet heavier than ever. He asks his father what would have happened that day if Diep had not stepped in to shield him from a blow. The question strikes directly at a weakness the father cannot hide. He freezes for a moment, and the house sinks into a suffocating silence. Yet that silence is not enough to erase the old resentments, the deep-rooted prejudices that have taken hold over the years. James says that the tragedies unfolding today are not mere coincidence. He believes they all stem from his father's actions, from the hostility and prejudice he has held on to for far too long. Those wounds have not only fallen upon him, but have also been inflicted upon Diep, a woman who has already endured more hardship than she ever deserved. James speaks slowly, each word clear and deliberate, stating that if anything were to happen to Diep, he would never forgive it. This is not a threat, but the final boundary he draws, for his love, for his choices, and for the person he is determined to protect. At the very moment when the tension seemed to have reached its absolute breaking point, James slowly slipped his hand into his pocket. It was a seemingly small gesture, yet it immediately drew the other man's attention. He took out the things he had quietly kept hidden all this time, the evidence he had silently gathered, unnoticed by anyone. Videos. Clear, unmistakable images. Nothing vague, nothing based on speculation. Each frame, each detail carried the undeniable weight of the law, enough to expose a truth long concealed and to turn the man who once stood firmly in control into someone who now had to face severe consequences. James had never wanted to use these. Throughout the time he spent collecting them, he hesitated countless times, repeatedly questioning whether he was going too far. Torn between family ties and justice, between filial duty and what was right, he wrestled with himself in silence. There were nights when he couldn't sleep, staring endlessly at the screen that held those files, wondering if the day would ever come when he would be forced to bring them into the light. This was never preparation for a reckless rebellion, but a final option he had no choice but to keep, an escape route when all other paths were cut off. James lifted his head and looked straight at his father. The look in his eyes was no longer the defiance of a rebelling son, nor the flare of uncontrolled anger. His voice dropped, calm to the point of coldness, each word delivered clearly and decisively. He said he never wanted things to come to this, but he would not hesitate if he was left with no other choice. James warned that if his father continued to make things difficult for Diep, if he interfered in her life or in little Nee's life even one more time, then these pieces of evidence would no longer remain hidden. He would not conceal them, he would not hesitate, and he would not turn back. Those words were not an emotional threat, but a carefully considered declaration. James did not raise his voice or shout, yet it was precisely that composure that made the weight of his words more terrifying than ever. He was no longer standing in the position of someone begging for acceptance. He was drawing a clear boundary, forcing the man in front of him to confront reality. The father was completely stunned. The shock was impossible to hide on his face. He had never imagined that one day his own son would stand before him like this, not pleading, not resisting in desperation, and not trying to persuade him through emotion. James now seemed like a different person altogether, mature, clear-headed, and resolute. For the first time in his life, the father realized that he no longer held absolute control. In that moment, silence enveloped the house. There were no more heated arguments, no shouting, no forceful commands. That heavy silence was the clearest sign that the balance of power had shifted. The father was forced to step back, even if he did not say it out loud. He accepted stopping. He accepted easing the pressure, at least for now. A fragile, temporary peace for James and Diep was formed from that very moment. However, there was no true remorse or surrender in the father's eyes. It was not the gaze of a man who had realized his mistakes, but that of someone quietly calculating, someone choosing to retreat temporarily while waiting for another opportunity. That silence did not signal an ending, but merely a brief pause, a moment where deeper intentions were silently taking shape, unspoken yet unmistakably present in the tense air that had not truly dissipated. The sense of peace that James and Diep are experiencing is, in truth, far more fragile than it appears on the surface. It is like a brief pause in the middle of a storm, just enough for one to catch their breath, but never a sign that the storm has truly ended. The father, though forced to step back in his direct confrontation with James, has never genuinely abandoned his intentions. His silence is not acceptance, nor is it letting go, but merely a temporary retreat as he waits for the right moment. On the surface, everything seems to have settled. There are no more relentless phone calls, no more open threats or visible pressure. Yet beneath that calm, calculations continue to move quietly. Somewhere beyond James and Diep's sight, other plans are being carefully prepared. Not hastily, not impulsively, but slowly and patiently, just as that man has always done whenever he seeks to maintain control over something. The true danger lies in that very silence. It makes everything unpredictable, leaving James unable to feel completely at ease even in the most ordinary of days. He knows all too well that the concession he was given is only temporary. He does not know when this fragile boundary will be broken, nor in what way. But he senses clearly that the confrontation between him and his father has never truly come to an end. From a broader perspective, this is not merely a conflict between father and son, but a fierce collision between two entirely different worlds. On one side is love, the desire to live honestly with one's emotions, to protect a small family built from simple, genuine things. On the other side is power, a mindset of control, a belief that blood ties and years of sacrifice grant one the right to decide another person's life. These two worlds exist side by side, yet have never truly found harmony. Amid all of this, James stands at a point of no return. His choice is already clear, and that very choice has placed him at the center of an ongoing conflict with no definite end. Diep and little Nee are the ones he wishes to protect most, yet they have also, unintentionally, become the most vulnerable points in this struggle. James understands that a single misstep could cause the fragile peace they now have to shatter at any moment. Thus, the confrontation between love and power, between blood ties and the right to choose one's own life, is far from over. It has only temporarily subsided, like a calm surface before larger waves crash in. And when the next upheavals come, they may no longer be limited to words or direct confrontations, but may carry far harsher and deeper trials, ones that will force everyone involved to pay the price for every choice they have made. The storm between James, Diep, and the powerful father has only temporarily settled. Will this fragile calm last, or is it merely the silence before a much greater storm quietly approaches? Will the choices James is about to make lead him to happiness, or will they force him to pay an even more painful price? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and follow the next episode so you won't miss the latest developments in this story. Thank you all for watching, and see you again in the next episode.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Cái môi bị cái gì không biết. Tạm biệt mọi người.